right, today we're going to be getting into Team Drill 4. This is going to cover your search, traverse, illumination, and coordinated illum from the advanced fire missions. So as per usual, when you open up, you are given a data sheet to go ahead and begin setting up your board. I'll go ahead and just copy everything down off to the right. Got a GI of 0464. We've got a grid to our MFP of 0200 6500. We have a mounting azimuth of 2700, and a reefer deflection of 0700. Our MFP is also at an altitude of 400. We also now have an attitude of our guns. So I'll copy that down for future use. All right, let's go ahead and get this board set up. While indexed at 0, we'll go ahead and place down our GI. Drop 2000 below the pivot point, and that will be the first number, so 04. 2000 to the left of the pivot point will be our second two digits, so 64. And then we just fill this out as we would on a map. Now we'll plot our MFP at 0265. 02 is here, 65. Nice and easy grid for us. Give it a hollow cross and label it. Now we can index our mounting azimuth of 2700. To begin putting down our reefer deflection of 07, we'll go left 400 and right 400. Now on here, we are also given information for forward plotting RP1. It says it's at a deflection of 0721 and it's 3,400 meters on the chart. So we'll index our deflection of 0721, break out our range arm, and we'll go straight up from our MFP, 3,400 meters. Place a plot. And label it RP1. We'll pull that altitude as well of 460. And we now have our board set up to begin receiving missions. Getting into situation Bravo, Delta 60 calls an adjust fire grid, says there's a company assembly area, and gives us a width, a length, and an attitude. Now we can compare that attitude to not only our gun's attitude, but our mounting azimuth, to see if it's within 100 of either. In this case, target attitude of 2700, our mounting azimuth is 2700. We know that this is a search mission. If that target attitude was within 100 of our gun attitude, then it would be a traverse mission. So right away, I'm gonna go ahead and enter my forms book and go to my search mission formulas. You'll notice in our FDC order, we have everything filled out except for the method of fire for effect. That is something that we're gonna have to determine. In your search mission formula, you'll see that 1 round covers 30 meters and 4 rounds cover 100 meters. This is of course for an 81 system, which we're using for these team drills. If 4 rounds covers 100 meters and we have to cover 200, that means that we're going to need 8 rounds in order to effectively engage that target. So right away, we can drop that 8 rounds here in the method of fire for effect and begin computing this mission. I'll start by indexing 0, since we have a grid, and we'll plot this target just like we would any grid mission. The grid is 034 630. So we'll go to 03 and 63. 8 green boxes over becomes 034. And then from 6-3, we don't have to go up any. So that is, in fact, where our target is. Place a circle, label it as 1. And then we can go ahead and parallel plot that with our MFP. Pulling some chart data here, I'm getting a deflection of 0.822. A chart range of 2450. The corresponding azimuth of 2578. Now we got to look and see if we have any altitude corrections that we need to apply. Our target is at 480. We are at 400 for altitude. So we have a positive 80 for our VI. Divide that in half to get our altitude correction of positive 40. Looking at our charge versus range for our HE round, we're going to find that we are in, after adding this 40 to our 2450 and rounding to the nearest 25, of course, it's going to give us 2500 for our command range. And that charge will be charge 2. So our command range of 2500, we're at charge 2. And we can look for our angle T. We are at 2578 for our azimuth. The observer's at 2300. Find the difference, and that's 278. We'll record that as 280, going to the nearest 10. And since it's not in effect, we don't need to send it. Moving to our initial fire command. Mortar follows a section. They're firing HE quick for this first round. Number 2 gun is adjusting with 1 round in the adjust. And as we determined, we're doing 8 rounds of procs in the fire for effect. Pull over our deflection of 0.822, determined at charge 2, and then go into our TFT to find the requisite information. Charge 2 and a range of 2500 is going to give us an elevation of 1170, a time of flight of 35.7. And going over to table E, we could pull that max ord of 1548. We send that information to the gun line. 2 gun shoots it. We record it and stand by at our OT direction while we await that correction. EFL comes back, says left 100, add 100. So we'll go ahead and make that correction. We'll go left 2 green boxes, up 2 green boxes. Place our plot and circle. Now that we've made that adjustment, we can go ahead and bring it back to parallel with our MFP. And begin pulling our chart data. I'm getting a deflection here of 0.873. And a chart range of 2525. Now keep in mind, we got to bring down this altitude correction. So I'm going to write that here as a little reminder and fill out my subsequent command. We're still adjusting, so no change to mortar to fire or method of fire. Just bring over that deflection of 0.873. Input our command range. 2525 plus 40 gives us 2565. Round to the nearest 25, and that will be 2575. Charge versus range keeps us in charge 2 for that range. We're good to stay where we're at. So then we'll just pull the corresponding elevation. At 2575, I'm getting 1153. We can send that information to the gun line. 2 gun shoots it, and we're standing by at our OT direction while we wait for that correction. At this point, the FO says add 50, fire for effect. So I'll make that correction. And move it back to parallel with our MFP. For our chart data, a deflection of 0.877. Chart range, we are getting 2575. And now we're in the fire for effect phase. So mortar fire is going to change. We're going to have a section shooting 8 rounds prox. And you'll see this search up blank turns. That's something we're going to have to determine. So we'll go into our forms book. And we'll just follow as it says. To determine the number of turns, we're going to enter the firing table at the final chart range. What is our final chart range? It is 2575. Go to column 4 for the number of turns per 100 meters. So we'll go to table D at a range of 2575. Go to column 4, and that gives us 2 turns. So 2 turns times the area to be covered, expressed in thousands, or in hundreds rather. We have to cover 200, express that in hundreds, that's 2. So if 2 turns gets us 100 meters drop in elevation, and we need to cover 200, then it will be 4 total turns to cover 200 meters. Now getting into intervals, we have number of intervals is 1 less than the number of rounds in fire for effect. We determined that 8 rounds was our fire for effect, so 8 minus 1 gives us 7 intervals. Number of turns between rounds, we divide the turns 4 by intervals 7. Go into our calculator, 4 divided by 7 gives us 0.57, yada, yada, yada. We'll round that to the nearest turn, which is half a turn between rounds. So now that we have that, we have our turns between rounds. We can come over here and inform the gun line to search up half turn between rounds. Now we got to think. We just adjusted 2 gun to the center of this. So if we started at the center and we had them searching up 4 turns, if this is our target box with 2 gun in the middle adjustment, then they're going to cover this 100 meters and then 100 meters short, because the cannon moving up is going to bring these rounds closer. So we need to find what range this edge is, the far edge, since we're searching up, and go ahead and give that starting elevation so that when they go 4 turns down, they cover the full 200 meters of that target area. 4 turns up, rather. So we'll take half of this target area. We need to cover 200. Half of that is 100. So we'll just add 100 to our center point to get that far edge. Take our 2575, add 100. That's going to give us 2675. And now we got to factor in our altitude correction of 40, which is going to give us 2715. Round that to the nearest 25. That's going to give us a starting range, a command range of 2725. That's the elevation that the guns are going to start at. They're going to search up half a turn in between rounds, and by the time that they're done, they'll have covered this entire target area. So bring over that deflection of 0.877. Enter our TFT at the range of 2725, making sure that we're not bumping a charge at all. In this case, we're not. So in charge 2, 2725 gives us a elevation of 1117. We have 4 guns shooting 8 rounds each. That's 32 plus the 2 from before. That gives us 34 HE shot here. We send that out, they shoot it, the FO comes back, says an emission, estimated 30% casualties, and we can now hollow cross and record that target on our board and move on to the next situation. All right, moving into situation C, we are receiving a call for fire from Delta 6-1. He says adjust fire, gives us a grid, and says there's a company in the open. With that, he also gives us a width of the target as well as the length and a target attitude. Now, immediately when I see that attitude, I'm going to compare that to my mounting azimuth and my gun attitude to see whether I'm using a search or traverse. Target's at 1100 for attitude. My mounting azimuth is 2700. Since they're not within 100 of each other, this is not going to be a search mission. My gun attitude is 1080. The target attitude is 1100. They're within 100 of each other, so I know that this is going to be a traverse mission. In case I was really lost, it's also down here at the bottom of the computer record talking about traverse, so there's another hint. Looking at our FDC order, we can also see that just like our search mission, we are missing a method of fire for effect because we're going to have to determine that based on the information given here about that target. So we'll go ahead and open up our forms book to the traverse mission and fill in what we have. So first we need to find the area per gun. We'll do so by dividing the width of the target, in this case 240, by the number of guns. Obviously we're shooting a section, so we have 4. 240 divided by 4 is going to get you 60. So that is 60 meters that each gun has to cover. Now for the number of rounds in the fire for effect, it's determined by the area each gun has to cover. Just like in our search mission formula, we have 1 round per 30 meters, 4 rounds per 100. If we have to go 60 meters, that means each gun is firing 2 rounds in the fire for effect. So now I've got that, I can come back and complete my FDC order, knowing that we are firing 2 rounds in the fire for effect. Let's go ahead and plot this target and start pulling our data. Index 0, since we have a grid, and plot it just like we would on a map. Our easting is 038, northing is 629. Go to 0362, 638, and 629. So we went to 03, over to 038, and then up to 629 and place our plot. Give it a circle and bring it back to parallel with our MFP. All right, I'm getting a deflection of 0921. Corresponding azimuth of 2479. Pull our chart range. I'm getting 2775. All right, now we got to see if we have any vertical interval and altitude correction. Our target's at 420. Our MFP is at 400, so we do have a vertical interval of 20, but since we're using a modified observed chart, we are not going to be applying any altitude correction, so we're just going to have a 0 for that. At that range of 2775, we're firing HE, so we'll look into our charge versus range, and notice that we are in charge 2. Determining angle T, we are at 2479. The observer's at 2400. Find the difference. The angle T is 79. We're going to record that as 80 to the nearest 10. And it's not in effect, so we don't have to send it. Moving into the initial fire command, we have a section to follow. Shell infuse is HE quick, and the mortar to fire is number 2 gun. Method to fire, 1 round in the adjust. And as we determined earlier, we're doing 2 rounds of proxying the fire for effect. Bring over our deflection of 0921, charge 2, and begin pulling our data for this round. 2775 is going to give us an elevation of 1104, time of flight of 34.6, and go into table E, we'll find the max ord is 1459. We send that information to the gun line. 2 gun shoots it, we record it, and we're standing by at our OT direction, waiting for our correction. The FL comes back and says left 120, so we'll go ahead and make that adjustment. Line it up. Place our new target plot. And bring it back to parallel with our MFP. All right, I'm pulling a chart deflection of 0967 and a chart range of 2750. No change in mortar to fire or method to fire, so just bring over that deflection. Since we're not applying an altitude correction, our command range is the same as our chart, so we'll leave that blank and just pull that elevation. 2750, we're gonna get 110, correction 1110. We're gonna send that out to the gun line. 2 gun's gonna shoot, and then we're standing by at our OT direction, awaiting our correction. The FO comes back and says, drop 100. Make that adjustment and bring it parallel with our MFP. I'm pulling a chart deflection of 0965. A range of 2650. Once again, no change in mortar to fire, method of fire, so we just bring our data over and pull the corresponding elevation for 2650. And that is 1502. Correction. 1135. We send that information out. 2 gun shoots it. We record it and go back to our OT direction, awaiting that correction. The FL comes back, says drop 50, fire for effect. So now we can go ahead and make that adjustment. And once again, pull our chart data. I'm getting a chart deflection here of 0965 and a chart range of 2600. Now you'll see in your subsequent commands, it says prepare to traverse right, blank turns. So that's my cue to go back into my forms book and begin filling out the requisite information. So we have number of intervals. It's 1 less than the number of rounds to be fired in fire for effect, which is 2 rounds in that fire for effect minus 1 gives us 1 interval. Now we got to round our final chart range to the nearest 100 meters. 2600 is already there. So we're going to enter the deflection conversion table at the rounded final chart range of 2600. And we're going to go across, down the rounded range, and then where they intersect is the number of guns each has to traverse. In other words, we determine that each gun has to traverse 60 mils, and it's at a range of 2600. So where those two intersect on our deflection conversion table is going to be the total amount of mils each gun has to traverse in order to cover this target, or their 60 meters. You'll see here at 2600, we come across, and up at the top, we don't have a 60, so we'll just go to the nearest, in this case 50, and go down. They intersect at 20, so we have 20 mils to cover 60 meters at that range. Now looking at number of turns per gun, one turn of the traverse hand crank is 10 mils, so we'll take the number of mils divided by 10, and that's going to give us 2. If we got some weird number, we would just round off to the nearest hole, but in this case we don't, so we have 2 turns per gun. That is to say 2 total turns per gun. Now we're going to take our turns, divide it by the intervals of 1, and we would round that off to the nearest half turn if we got any weird number. But in our case, it just stays at 2 turns between rounds. Now, if we had a greater number of intervals, obviously you're going to get a different number, but for this situation, we only have 1 interval, so our number stays the same. We can come back here and tell them to traverse right 2 turns in between those rounds. We're in the fire for effect phase now, so we have a section firing. They're firing 2 rounds of procs. And now we have to determine where exactly all these guns are going to start from. If we want to cover the entire target area, we have to figure out a different starting point for each gun and then give them different deflections to get there. Different data. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to index that target attitude of 1100. Now that FO just adjusted us to this center point. In fact, I like to get rid of all my other adjustments just to make it a little more clear and easier to read. But he adjusted us to this center point. Now, we have half of that width on either side of that center point. So we're going to take our entire width of 240 divided by 4, because we have 4 guns. And as we did earlier, we got 60 meters per gun. And obviously half of that would be 120, half of that 240. All right, so we're going to go 120 above and 120 below, but we also have to put a dot at 60 above and below to represent all the different starting points we could be at. So we'll get our protractor and we'll go 60 meters above our center point and place a plot. Then we'll go 60 meters above that plot, or in other words, 120 meters above our center point and place a plot. We're then going to repeat that process for below, one at 60 and one at 120, to get our potential start points. Now, just like we did that for our target, we're going to have to do something similar for our MFP. But keep in mind, our guns aren't spaced out at that 60 meters, they're spaced out at 40 meters. So we'll index our gun attitude of 1080. We'll come over to our MFP. And we also got to remember, this grid, this plot that we have for the MFP is not the center point of our MFP. It is 2 gun. So we have to think about, where is 1 gun, 3 gun, and 4 gun going to be in relation to 2 gun? If we're looking at the target area, we always know that when we're laid in towards the targets, 1 gun is going to be to the right of 2 gun, 3 gun is going to be to the left of 2 gun, and 4 gun to the left of 3. So in this case, looking at the target area, I know 1 gun is going to be to the right or below our MFP, and 3 gun and 4 gun are going to be to the left or above our MFP. So I'll come in here I'll make a plot 40 meters below my 2-gun plot, 40 meters above my 2-gun plot, and then 80 meters above my 2-gun plot. So we have 4-gun here, 1 gun on this side. And obviously the middle of the holocross is 2-gun, and 3-gun is the remaining unlabeled. Now we can kind of reorient ourselves to be looking at the target, and we have to determine where each of these guns are going to start. We have 4 guns, but 5 points. So you can either start on the left and traverse right, or start on the right and traverse left. The point being, every gap in here is going to be filled by the rounds that we're shooting. So looking at our prompt here, it says prepare to traverse right. So if we need to cover every gap here, then I need my left starting gun to start on the farthest left end. Looking down at my MFP, my furthest left gun is 4-gun. So this is going to be 4-gun start point. And filling that out the rest of the way right, 4, 3, 2, and 1, we now have the starting points for all of these guns. Now to pull our command data, we're simply going to parallel plot each gun with their respective starting point. So I'm going to start with 1 gun. Get them nice and lined up. Using my range arm to ensure that I'm still staying in the same boxes. And read the deflection that I get. I'm getting 0.958. So we'll tell number 1 gun, deflection 0.958. And we're going to repeat this process all the way down until we have all 4 guns deflections. So parallel plot 2 with 2. Take extra care here to make sure that you are parallel plotting the same gun to the same target start point. It's really easy to get mixed up with all these plots on the board. So take a little extra time here just to ensure you're looking at the same thing on both ends. All right, for 2-gun, I'm getting 0.965. 3-gun. I'm getting 0.973. Finally, for 4-gun, I'm getting 0.980. Now, for simplicity's sakes, we're going to take that chart range of 2600 and pull a corresponding elevation, which is 1147. We're going to shoot those rounds. 2 rounds out of 4 guns, plus the 7 from earlier, gives us 11 HE expended. The FL comes back and says end of mission, estimated 50% casualties. And now we can erase not only our guns at the MFP, but all of our additional plots up here on this target and record only that center point for target Charlie Alpha 0701. All right, getting into situation Delta, we have Alpha 60 calling an adjust fire grid. He's got some suspected enemy noise and wants illumination. The chief says we're going to shoot 1 gun for this. 1 round in adjust, 2 rounds in fire for effect. So getting into processing this mission, since we have a grid, we'll make sure that we index 0, and we'll plot this just like we would on a map. 032 626. Gonna put us right here. Place that plot. And now we can bring it over our MFP nice and parallel in order to pull our chart data. And I'm getting a deflection of 0.673. Corresponding azimuth of 2727. For our chart range, $2,700. And now, since we're dealing with illumination, we're not worried about impacting with VI or altitude correction. So even though we're given this altitude, we would have an altitude correction had this not been an Illum mission, we're just not going to compute and or apply that for this. All right, so we're going to go now into our charge. Looking back at our data sheet, we're actually using our M301 Alpha 3. So we'll make sure we're in the right charge book. We'll go to the charge versus range. And at 2,700, looks like it could be charge 7 or charge 8. So I'm going to check both. Charge 7 only goes up to 2,650. So I know I'm in charge 8. Don't need to calculate angle T for this either. We'll just move into our initial fire command. Our order to follow is number 1 gun, firing Illum. Method of fire is 1 round in adjust, 2 rounds in the fire for effect. Bring over our deflection, our charge, and then pull the required information. Charge 8. $2,700 puts us at 1054 for elevation, a time setting of 30.0, and a max ord of 1512. Now notice we also don't have a time of flight here because you have this time setting that's going to say at 30 seconds this round is going to go off. So we'll go ahead and we'll shoot that round, record it, and we can stand by at our OT direction while we're awaiting our correction. The FO says drop 200, down 100. Now this down is new for Illum, so all we're going to do to the plotting board is this drop 200, and we'll deal with the down after. From our point, we'll go down 200. And place our new plot. We'll bring it over the vertical center line, rather the in line with our MFP. That's going to give us a chart deflection of 0.695. Check our range. I'm getting a chart range of 2475. Now we're still adjusting. Mortar to fire, method of fire doesn't change. We're not going to be messing with our deflection with this down 100, so we can just bring that over. And now we can compute our new information for elevation. And also we're going to double check that this range here doesn't drop us into a lower charge. I'll check back to charge 7 just to make sure. And it does in fact drop us to charge 7. So we're going to have to annotate that in our charge block. And then pull our elevation and time setting. The only thing is we have to factor in this down 100. So I'm going to go ahead and pull at this chart range, in chart 7, my time and elevation as normal, but I'm going to have to adjust it. So at 24.75 in the charge book, it just rounds off to the nearest 25. So you can go to either, or the nearest 50 rather, so you can choose either. In this case, I'll just go up to 10.17 and a fuse setting of 27.2. Now getting into our forms book, we are going to be dealing with the illumination cross and the hob line. Now this information here, this elevation of 10.17 and a time setting of 27.2 is going to have us bursting right at the hob line, which is about 600 meters above the ground. Now if we get a down 100, we have to go from that height of burst down 100. So instead of being right here, we're actually going to be down 2 intervals from the hob line. And since we're below, it's going to be a -2. That's important because now we can come down here and we're going to multiply our change in elevation and change in fuse setting by -2. We'll apply that to the chart elevation and time setting, and that will give us our actual command time setting and elevation. So looking into columns 4 and 5, we have a -21 for an elevation change, and that's for a 50 meter increase in the height of burst, and a -0.9 second change for our fuse setting. Now keep in mind, that's for an increase. We want to decrease, and that's why we have a -2 here. So we'll take -2, multiply it by -21. That's going to give us 42. And we're going to add that 42 to our original elevation. It's going to give us a command elevation of 1059. For our time setting, we'll take -0.9, multiply it by -2 to get 1.8, and we'll add that to our time setting of 27.2. That'll give us a fuse setting of 29.0 seconds. We can now go ahead, send that information out. Number 1 gun's going to shoot that, and we'll stand by at that OT direction while we await our corrections. In this case, the FO comes back, says down 50 and prepare to mark. So our chart information is going to stay the same. We don't actually need to do anything to the plotting board, but we do need to look back at our illumination cross. That information put us at down 100. He wants us to go down another 50, so now we're going to be at 150 below the hob line, which is 3 increments, or in other words, we now have to multiply these corrections by -3 instead of -2. So we'll take -21 times -3, that'll give us 63. We'll add that to that elevation of 1017, which once again, that's that chart elevation for what we're pulling. And that's going to give us a new command of 1080. Our time setting, same thing. -0.9 times -3, that'll give us 2.7. And we're going to add that to our 27.2, or what we pulled for our chart range. And that'll give us 29.9 seconds. Nothing changed here for the deflection or the charge. The only things that changed was the time setting and elevation. So that's all we need to put. We send that. 1 gun shoots another one. And as soon as they shoot it, we're going to start our timer. Once that target has its best illumination based off that illum round, that FO is going to call up mark time. We stop it, and we stopped it at 40 seconds. That gives us our mark time to go ahead and turn this into a coordinated illum mission. So moving into that, situation echo, he calls for fire saying, yes, there are people there, troops digging in, and he wants illumination and procs in the fire for effect. In other words, this is going to now turn into our coordinated illum mission. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my initial fire command. I'm going to draw a line down to note that I'm going to have 2 different commands going off here. I'm Also going to bring my mark time of 40 seconds from that previous illum over and place it in our mark time. Now for our initial chart data, this grid is the same as from our illum. So we're just going to pull all that chart information that we had from here. So we had a deflection of 0.673, a range of 2,700. This is all going to be for the HE stuff, so we can't give them the charge, but we can pull the azimuth of 2,727. Now, once again, since we're using HE for this, we are going to be factoring in our VI and altitude correction. The target's at 330. We are at 400. That gives us a VI of -70. Divide that in half, and that will give us an altitude correction of -35. So let's go ahead and apply that altitude correction to 2,700, and that's going to give us 2665. Rounded to the nearest 25 will give us a command range of 2675. Looking at our charge versus range for our HE, that's going to put us in charge 2. Now looking at our angle T, once again, since we're working with actually impacting on the ground, we're going to want to determine that. The FO's at 3000 mils for his OT direction. Our azimuth to the target is 2727. Find the difference. That gives us 273. Record that to the nearest 10 at 270, and it's not in effect, so we don't have to send it. Now moving into our initial fire command. We have mortar to follow, 234. Shooting HE quick. Number 3 gun is our mortar to fire, since the mortar adjusting. And they're doing 1 round in the adjust with 3 rounds prox in the fire for effect. But notice as well that our time of opening fire is now at my command, so we must send them the at my command. Bring over that deflection, 0.673, charge 2. And pull our elevation here. Going into table D, and a range of 2675. Give us an elevation of 1129. It's also going to give us a time of flight of 35.1. Going to table E, it's going to ask us for our max ord, so we got to find that, and that is 1494. Now let's give one gun their information. Number 1 gun, illum, and since nothing's changed, we didn't get any additional corrections, we're going to bring over that fuse setting, the elevation, and the already expended rounds to this mission. So we give them their elevation of 1080. They should already know the fuse setting. You could put it for redundancy, but I'm just going to give them their elevation. They know they're just sending another round. They shot 3 before. They're going to shoot 4 this time, or rather 1 more to make 4, and it'll be 1 HE. Now, just like you told 2, 3, and 4 gun that they're going to be at your command, you need to let 1 gun know. And that's because you're going to have an interval. You want that round, that HE round, impacting at your mark time, or rather, if it takes 40 seconds from when you shoot that illum round, you want at 40 seconds that HE round to impact the target. So you could take that 40, subtract the time of flight for your HE round. So 40 minus 35.1, that's going to give us 4.9 seconds. In this case, you're going to drop off that last decimal, and that's going to give us an HE interval of 4 seconds. And what that means, essentially, 1 gun's going to hang it and fire. 4 seconds later, the HE is going to be hang it, fire, and that round should impact when the FO can best see it. So we'll send that information out to the gun line. But one thing we got to note here on max ord is that we have 2 round types going out. So sure, I pulled it for the HE, but I also need to pull it for my Illum. So going back in at that range, which keep in mind is back here, we're not working off this same command range here. We got to pull it for what they're actually shooting. And that's giving me a max ord of 1300. Now, realistically, you're only going to give the highest max ord. So between the two, you only need to write the highest, but there's both for your reference. We send it to the gun line, call number 1 gun, hang it, fire, they shoot. 4 seconds later, number 3 gun, hang it, fire, they shoot, we record it, and now we're standing by for any corrections at our OT direction. The FO comes back, says lift 50, drop 50, fire for effect. So we'll come back to our board and we'll apply that from our original plot. Because keep in mind, this adjustment over here was for our Illum round. Now we're going back to this and making that adjustment. So I like to write Illum on the Illum round, just so I can't confuse myself, and then make that adjustment from this first point. For left 50, drop 50, go here. And pull our data. I'm getting a chart deflection of 0.695. Getting a range of 2650. And keep in mind, we can't forget to bring down this altitude correction. So I'll put my little reminder there. And then I'll begin filling out my subsequent commands. You'll also see that mortar and fire up here. We have number 1 gun fully filled in, already filled in rather, and that's because they're still going to be firing. You still have to give them data. And now that it's in the fire for effect, you got to let them know that they're doing 2 rounds. They're still at your command, so 2 rounds at my command, and then just give them the elevation again. 1080. Now for 2, 3, and 4 gun, 2, 3, 4, 3 rounds procs at my command. Bring over our deflection of 0.695 and get our command range. 2650 minus 35. That's going to give us 2615. Rounded to the nearest 25 is 2625. And we'll pull the corresponding elevation for that. 1141. Now we send that information out. We wait for the guns to get up. Say number 1 gun hang it, fire. They hang 2. In addition to the 4 from earlier, that's 6 Illum total. 4 seconds later, we give 2, 3, and 4 hang it, fire. They all hang 3 rounds of procs. 3 times 3, because we have 3 guns now shooting the procs. That's 9 rounds, plus 1 from earlier is 10 HE. We shoot it, we record it, we're standing by for any additional information from the FO. And he says, end of mission, estimated 40% casualties. Now you can go back, record that target as necessary, and move on to the next situation, which in this case is the end of Team Drill 4.